Hi, welcome once again to Season 2 of Pages Promotions Indie Reads TV. I have a lot of fun guests in the studio. This season we're going to have a great time meeting some authors that maybe you hadn't been exposed to before. Today in the studio we have a wonderful, really engaging author, Donovan Neal. And he is a Christian author, and he also does some other stuff. So we're going to talk to him. Welcome.
Thanks, Diana, for having me.
Thanks for coming in. I'm really glad that you could make it today. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of connection with Christian authors because, partly because I am not a Christian myself, so I don't encounter people who write in that genre very often. The other thing, too, is it's very niche genre. Mm-hmm. So I'd like for you to talk just for a couple minutes about the experience of being in such a tight-knit genre, whether it's Christian or whatever. The experience of being a niche author is very different from somebody like me who writes mainstream fiction. What's that experience like for you, and what have the responses from readers been like?
It's challenging. There's not a lot of content, and I basically got involved in Christian fiction just due to the fact that, again, being a Christian, wanting to find some stories that really resonated with me. I love the Lord of the Rings series, things like that. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the most famous piece of, I'll say, Christian work that most people are familiar with, in light of the fact that the author was a Christian. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't a lot of modern day stories out there, at least not at the time that I started writing, that I wanted to see. And so kind of in my audacity, I said, okay, I've read a couple stories. Well, let me see if I can produce something that people would like. And that's kind of how I've gotten started. And over time, I just realized that, wow, I am in a niche. Didn't realize that as I was going into the publishing industry. A lot of Christian fiction definitely is not geared towards fantasy. Mm-hmm. It's geared more towards, I'll call it soft romance, Amish type of fiction.
Sure, yeah.
Those kind of bonnet fiction sometimes is the word that's used.
Yep.
And so if you go into the Barnes & Noble, we still have a couple of those around.
Yeah.
When you look in the area of Christian fiction, it's predominantly dominated by, again, this bonnet type of soft romance type of fiction. So there's
gentle fiction.
Yeah. Clean reads sometimes are also the words that are used. And so I wanted to write something that, well, I'm an action guy. I like the explosions.
Sure.
I'm an Avengers Endgames kind of guy. So
Okay.
There's enough of those type of stories in the Bible that there's some things that can be lifted out that can be really exciting. And so I tried to do that.
Okay. So the first book, this is your Third Heaven series. Or is it Rise of the Fallen? Is the series name Third Heaven?
Yes.
Okay, I got that right. Good. Diana's working. So the first book, The Rise of Fallen Stars, can you give me an idea of what the synopsis is? First of all, this is a tremendously engaging cover.
Thank you.
Whoever's doing your cover art's doing a great job. Give them a raise.
I'm going to keep them.
Yeah, because they're doing a great job with this art. Can you give me a synopsis of the book and talk a little bit about the main character?
Sure. Well, the main character is Lucifer. It's actually the story of the fall of Lucifer. So those people that are familiar with that biblical character, it basically asks the question, what was Lucifer thinking? How did Satan become Satan? What weakness did he think he could perceive that he saw in God, that he thought that he could usurp him? You're basically talking about a story of an angelic coup d'etat.
Sure, yeah. Basically, that is what it is. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but, now that you bring it up, that it kind of sort of is that.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought it, reading my Torah, it reads different when you read it in the Torah, right?
Right.
So tell me more about the book.
Well, basically, it starts off, simply put, as Michael is angelic brother. The book starts off in our far-flung future, where these two angelic brothers are crossed each other in the lake of fire. Mm-hmm. Lucifer's already been judged. He's already been sentenced. and his angelic brother Michael is about to walk away from this scene after all these thousands of years of this epic struggle. And he's just basically kind of reminiscing, how did we get to this place where you're on this side of the lake of fire, on this side of judgment, and I'm on this side? And so the whole 4-book series is essentially just a flashback as to how they got to these two disparate places. So it's similar in the sense of like the Titanic, the ship is going to sink.
Right.
This question is, how did
it get
What's
there?
The details,
yeah.
all the drama that played up to that. So that's what the series essentially is about.
That's pretty cool. You have 4 books in the series. Is there a resolution at the end of your series?
There is.
Or is the series not done yet?
The series is done. Originally, I thought about a 5-book series, but I was able to kind of condense it down, shoehorn enough material in there to get it down.
So this one is the first in the series.
The Rise of Fallen Stars.
And then The Birth of God is the second. And again, can I just say, cover art is pretty darn spectacular.
Thanks.
I mean, these are striking covers.
Well,
truly.
my cover artist is from the Philippines, and his name is Roger Despy. I actually found him on 99 Designs.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 3rd book is Realm of the Dead, which, my goodness, looks pretty ominous. Wow. And then Third Heaven, Apocalypse of the Kings. I was thinking about snakes, so we're not going to have that on the screen for too long.
That's okay. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Exactly. I have never seen any good purpose in having snakes on the planet. My brother convinced me of this when I was 6, and he put garter snakes in my bed, and I said, no, I'm so done with snakes now. And then, Christian tradition teaches us that it's okay to not like snakes. So I'm all right with it. Give me an idea of the progression of the series. So you say it's written in flashback. So the first book deals with, this is now where we are. How did we get here? What's the progression? Is the series a progression of let's start at the beginning and work forward, or is it a series of flashbacks on top of flashbacks?
It's the former. It's a progression. So in book 1, you're basically dealing with creation up until the actual fall of Lucifer. In fact, by the time you get to the end of this book 1, you are essentially in Genesis just prior to the fall of Adam and Eve. You can literally, as you get to the end, kind of pick up the book of Genesis, and you know what's going to happen next.
Right.
The temptation of Adam and Eve. Book 2, The Birth of God, deals with essentially the fall of Adam and Eve up until the birth of Christ. That's the play on the words, the title, The Birth of God.
Sure.
And so it deals with a lot of the incidents that happen in the Torah, Christians referring to it as the Old Testament, and all the different activities that and again, events that take place during that period of time up until the birth of Christ. Book 3, The Realm of the Dead, deals with the time that Jesus was on the earth, and specifically those 3 days that he was dead and in the grave. What was going on then?
That's going to be an interesting read. Everybody has a different take on that part of the story, and I have... in my personal religious search, I've tried to read as many different opportunities to read that story, because that's a fascinating tale in and of itself. I mean, the whole of Torah and even New Testament, these are fascinating stories. But those 3 days are especially compelling because nobody has a true specific understanding of what was going on, because he was in a tomb.
Right, he's in a tomb. He's dead in his grave. Where did he go?
Right, yeah, and how did that happen, and what brought about it? And this is I wrote a book, a satire about what happens in the afterlife when you're given do you go to heaven, do you go to hell, that decision-making process. I wrote a satire about it because the question was, nobody's ever been there, so nobody can tell me I'm wrong. So, and I had fun with it because there are so many heavy books written on the subject that I just wanted to lighten things up, but I wanted people to think simultaneously.
Right.
So, and then the fourth book in this series.
So the fourth book, we're basically kind of in our modern era. And basically, you're dealing with the events that happen in the book of Revelation. You're dealing with the Antichrist. You're dealing with the return of Christ. You're dealing with the Battle of Armageddon and the final judgments that kind of brings everything. So by the time you get to the end of book 4, you're brought back to where Michael and
At
Lucifer,
the beginning of book 1.
Exactly.
So it loops.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that resolution is tied up at the end where he's about to walk away for the final time.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a pretty epic tale. So I tell people, if you like the Avengers, if you like Frank Peretti's This Present Darkness,
Lord of the Rings. If you like Lord of the Rings, if you like the Narnia series,
Yep.
all of that would fit well within that scope.
You probably like these books.
Okay, and I'm a Tolkien Lewis fan, so I was kind of intrigued when I was learning about your work. I thought, wow, this is cool, and it's got like Old Testament and Torah stuff written in it, and it's a different take, and it's a different perspective.
Definitely a different take and perspective.
So, as an author and an avid reader, I found that to be tremendously enticing. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing that you've got going here. I mean, and I like that you're taking risks within a genre that usually has so many rules.
It definitely does. So I've gotten a lot of feedback, mostly positive, but also negative. And usually the negative feedback is that you're writing outside the constraints of what someone would deem acceptable, whether you're writing God as a character, whether you are taking an aspect of the religious text, because obviously these are sacred texts to a great many of the world's population, so they
Absolutely.
have a lot of intense feeling and emotion regarding how you depict certain things. And so I try to be very careful and very respectful, and so in all of the books there's always a preface that basically indicates this is not prescriptive, this is not doctrinal. Consider it biblical fan fiction, if you would.
Oh, I like that.
So
well done, you. That's great. Because that's exactly what this is.
That's exactly what it is. It's not meant to be doctrinal. It's meant to be a fun, entertaining read. And yes, there are some deeper things that you can lift from the writing, but it's not meant to be in such a way as to, in no way would I ever compare these 4 books as comparisons to sacred scripture.
But these are not the Gospels.
Exactly. They're not the Gospels, they're not the Torah, they're not the Old Testament. They're just lifting stories and teachings, particularly for those who have a Protestant bent. But be that as it may, I found that even individuals who are not professed persons of faith have enjoyed the read.
Sure.
Because it's entertaining. It's an entertaining read.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. One of the things that I noticed as I was looking through is you've included this really cool glossary in the back of book 1. Did you do this in all of the books?
Yes.
This is really cool because you're offering a level of understanding to the non-Christian reader that will help them to brain place the story. I mean, I see this no differently as Neal deGrasse Tyson throwing a glossary in the back of his book about astrophysics, explaining to you what some of the jargon is, because
there's a lot of jargon.
It's going to help you when you sit down to read the book, and then it might entice you to go back and read certain sections so that you can glean a greater understanding of story.
Well, I've definitely had that where individuals have read particular portions of the book and they literally go back to see what the scriptures have to say about that section, and they're surprised. And I commonly get, wow, I never knew that was in there, or I've read that scripture 1,000 times. I've never looked at it in this context before. So it's all, I love the letters and the emails that I get from people just for that issue alone, just to hear the different experiences that people have as they interface with the book.
And that brings me to my next question is, I realize as a Christian, a lot of the doctrine you already know, and different people have varying degrees of familiarity with Christian sacred texts, any sacred text for that matter. How much research did you have to do to write these books? Because somebody who is a devout follower is going to call you out on a mistake.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is reasonable to expect. So how much research did you have to do for these? And then the follow-up question to that is, how long did it take to get these written?
Well, in terms of the research aspect, it actually was pretty easy for me because I was in the ordained ministry in the Church of God in Christ for over 20 years.
There you go.
So
you had a secret.
So I have been versed for over 2 decades in Christian doctrine, apologetics. My former pastor has a PhD in from seminaries, several masters, and so I was taught, and just getting my ordination license, I had to go through various aspects of biblical doctrine. So it was easy for me in that regards. And then having been I'm 52, and so having been a Christian for 30 some years, and having read the Bible over and over and over again,
sure,
you just learn.
You tend to internalize.
You get a lot of stuff, and so like I said, I'm in apologetics, and so I read different faiths and how they comparative religion. And seeing different things, and so I've researched. There's a book out there. I'm forgetting the title of it, but it deals with the different angels. Excuse me. And I've used that book as a reference to names, and they're Muslim angels in the Muslim faith, and so. I use mythology too as a branch in some respects. The idea being that fallen angels, which is this whole story revolves around,
right,
could have actually been mythical demigods and things like that.
Sure.
As far as how long it took me to write, well, the first book took me over 7 years to write. So
wow,
it took me a long time writing little bits here and there, trying to figure out what I wanted to say in terms of the story. But after the first book came out, things got really easy at that stage, and so each book took me approximately a year. The last book was really the hardest. I was only because you're dealing with the Book of Revelation. It's so packed.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of material in there.
There's a lot of material, and you're trying to, how much of this do you want to tie into what's happening in present day, and how far
and how does it interlink with the story you've already told?
Exactly.
If this is fan fiction, for lack of a better term, you have to make sure that it's congruent, even in its fandom.
And I've made it very clear to my readers. As I said, look, I tried to make this as consistent as possible with biblical lit, but I failed.
Hi, not perfect.
Right, I'm like, there's no way. I said, in the end, there's a story that that's consistent in terms of its own internal world.
Okay.
And I've tried to do the best that I could to make that story consistent and have a nice, reasonable end that fans could expect. But in doing that, recognize that there's no way I can capture everything that's in.
Well, of course not.
It's not the Bible. You want to read the Bible, read the
Bible. Yes, and it's like anything else. You want to write about World War II, there's going to be places you're not going to be able to describe everything.
Right. The European theater is different than the Pacific theater.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, not your fault. But let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
What was the biggest challenge for you? Was it that continuity, or was there something else that just noodled at your brain that you had to really work through to find a solution for?
Well, there was a lot of different challenges. They really varied, but the biggest was really trying to do the best that I could to be faithful to what I perceive to be maybe people's expectations as they read a book about the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly, this is essentially fantasy.
Right.
So that was probably in the back of my head in terms of how to best represent those issues. Now, that being said, there was a lot of issues that I had with in the Bible. You see angels. And angels, in the book of Daniel, for example, this angel has a sword, and he references the fact that he's been held up in terms of answering Daniel's prayer because he's been opposed by this other angel. Mm-hmm. And so the implication seems to be that there's been some type of battle going on. And it's taken him all this time, 21 days, to get Daniel this answer because he has to kind of gone through this battle. And so the question becomes, well, if angels can battle, they can physically contend with one another, and the purpose of fighting one another is really to do the other person harm. So that brings up other issues. In terms
so
of,
contradictory.
So
Yeah.
that brings up other issues. It's like, okay, well, if they're fighting, that means they can be injured, and that would then by you take it further, it means that they can maybe be killed.
Not omnipotent.
They're definitely not omnipotent. Mm-hmm. So I had to deal with the whole issue in terms of angelic mortality and things like that, and how would angels fight one another. And again, just it's like in the dealing with this story one, in this book, it's like, how do you kill Superman? What is God's kryptonite? Does God have a kryptonite?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, there's wow, what a question. Cheapers. Hadn't thought of it that way, but I mean, if you're dealing with questions of mortality on a divine scale, that's a tough one.
What did Lucifer see, and what did he say to convince a third of the heaven's population that we can take down God, we can actually do this? What did he see? What did he perceive? What was his strategy?
What was that pep talk?
That was that.
Wow.
Exactly.
Jeez.
So,
I hadn't thought of it that way. That's pretty remarkable that you can see. This is why I love authors. We are so good at having the ability to find story where nobody else has thought to look. I think that's fantastic. That's just super, super awesome. Okay, so I wanted to talk about your other two books. We've got about 6 minutes left, and I don't want to neglect these other works. And I don't have images of these, but I do want to talk about them. Let's see if I can show this one. There we go. So this is a devotional, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about this one?
So that's Let Thy Feet Be Washed is basically a message that I preached at my old church many years ago. And it basically deals with the idea of being vulnerable and allowing God and people to touch the intimate parts of ourselves. And the feet are the part that gets dirty, they can stink, their corns are on there, all that kind of stuff. And these represent things in our lives that we might not want other individuals to touch and to see. And so that's the title, Let Thy Feet, allow yourself to be touched in a way that you can receive healing and cleansing and move on.
Allow that level of vulnerability that otherwise maybe you would shun.
Exactly.
That's extraordinary. Wow, what a great idea. See? This is so much fun. Okay, then this one. Tell us about this one.
So I finished writing my novel, now what? So that was
a question we so often ask ourselves.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So tell us about this.
So essentially, I made so many mistakes in publishing these books that if it seemed ridiculous that other authors would have to come behind me and make those similar mistakes. And so I tried to put in a really succinct fashion some to-dos and some not-to-dos in terms of, now that your book is done, this is how you can market it, this is how you can get things copyrighted, put it in an audio book form, all those kind of a lot of typical questions that authors might have, and the kind of resources to point them if they want to go further.
So this is really a simplified guidebook to the headaches we all encounter in this really fascinating industry.
Absolutely.
And I shared with you earlier that I love this quote of yours on the back of the book, and I'm going to read it here on television so that it can live forever. And authors everywhere, go back and listen to this part of the show over and over again. You say, writing a novel without wanting to market it is like having a child without wanting to raise it. I cannot agree more strongly in that statement. Talk about that a little bit. What is it? You're in a niche market.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We've got about 3 minutes left. You're in a super, this is the center of the bullseye market for you. How did you find marketing strength?
Accidentally.
Oh, great. Thanks. That helps.
But now that I'm in the market, I've learned to better refine and find out which authors are like me, They're not a lot, but they are out there. And how to you piggyback on those audiences that enjoy those other authors. So that's a key thing. I think if you're coming into the market, find out who's your audience, who's similar to you. I think you can do that kind of pretty easily on Amazon. And then from there, are you writing to those type of people that read that other author's works? And,
Right,
I
right.
think that really helps people a lot.
Are you the audience you're trying to reach is also the
Exactly.
other question I ask
Exactly.
people. Is, are you writing for you or are you writing for the market? If you're not writing for you, you're not going to find the market.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely initially wrote for me. I did not intend this to blow up how it has been,
Yeah.
but I'm happy in the results.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it's always good. How important has social media been for your marketing plan?
Very important. Between the website, Facebook, Twitter in the early stages was a huge influence on getting the word out. So Twitter, Facebook are definitely the two key platforms from a social media perspective. Instagram is slowly becoming more of a platform of use as well. But mainly, Facebook will probably be the number one.
Okay. We've got just about a minute left. Is there any place you're going to be in the next coming months that people could come out and meet you?
Typically, I try to make the rounds in the Southeast Michigan's library authors fairs.
Okay.
The next one I'm hoping to attend will be the Plymouth Libraries Fair. So these usually take place in the spring, but I always refer people to go to my website.
Absolutely.
To find out the events that are upcoming.
Yeah, and we've got your website scrolling on the screen so people can contact you that way and check out your event calendar. Check out to learn more about your ministry and your testimony through these books, which I think is fabulous.
Thanks.
And I'm a huge proponent of supporting people of all diverse direction because I think we need that in life.
Always willing to help other authors. I know how difficult it can be.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming out, Donovan.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
And please keep us updated on your next books and come visit us again when you've got
Absolutely.
something else out.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
Thanks.